Are your questions closing doors or opening them? You know, as educators, we've all been there. You throw a question out to the class and you just get a room full of blank stares. Or maybe it's the exact same three hands shooting up every single time. It really begs the question, are our traditional classroom questioning methods inadvertently shutting down student thinking? What if we could use questioning not just to, test their recall, but to radically improve student achievement and actually find out how and what our students are really thinking? I absolutely love this quote by David Cooper. He says, "People and organizations move in the direction of the questions they ask." Think about that for a second. In our classrooms, this literally means the way we frame our questions dictates the entire direction of our students' learning. A question can either be a giant brick wall that causes a student to freeze up, or it can be an open invitation to explore, connect, and grow. So, welcome to this explainer on questioning for student achievement. Our goal today is pretty straightforward. We want to unlock potential and drive success by equipping ourselves with actionable, totally research-backed questioning strategies. We're going to look at how to make student thinking visible, allowing us to deeply understand what they know and ultimately use that knowledge to push their academic achievement forward. Okay, let's look at our roadmap for today. We're going to cover 1. Beyond the right answer, 2. Formative assessment in action, 3. The teacher's questioning toolkit, 4. Empowering student-generated questions, and finally, 5. Creating a culture of inquiry. Let's dive right in. Section 1. Beyond the right answer, rethinking questioning. So, historically, we've had a bit of a flaw in how we ask questions. For decades, classrooms have basically relied on this initiate, response, evaluate, or IRE pattern. I like to think of it as table tennis questioning. The teacher serves a closed question, one student bats back a super brief response, and the teacher evaluates it as right or wrong. Ping, pong, ping, pong. It's a bit exhausting, right? And it actually limits participation, positioning the teacher as the sole judge of knowledge. Instead, we really want to shift to a basketball model. This is a dialogic approach where the heavy cognitive lifting is shared across the entire learning community. You pass the question, students pass their thoughts to each other, they build on ideas, and suddenly the whole room is engaged in much deeper thinking. And this basketball model, it translates into the very words we choose to use. Often, we accidentally fall into deficit-oriented questioning. Asking a student something like, "Why didn't you finish the assignment?" Or, "What's the problem with this argument?" It traps them in a deficit mindset that's entirely focused on failure. But look at the possibility-oriented reframes. Instead of asking why they didn't finish, what if we ask, "What helped you complete the parts you did finish?" That tiny shift directs the student's focus toward identifying their successful strategies. It builds resilience. It completely changes the momentum from looking backward at a problem to moving forward with possibility. All right, moving on to Section 2, Formative Assessment in Action. This philosophical shift brings us to a really crucial point, understanding what formative assessment actually is. It is assessment for learning, not just a measurement of learning when it's totally over. Seminal research by Paul Black and Dylan William found that when teachers check for understanding while the teaching is still happening and then adjust their instruction immediately based on that, it produces massive learning gains. We're talking about accelerating learning by 6 to 9 months. And get this, those gains are actually strongest for lower attaining learners. Formative assessment turns errors into totally safe learning opportunities. And well-designed questions, they are the engine that makes this real-time feedback loop possible. Which brings us to Section 3, the Teacher's Questioning Toolkit, High-Impact Tactics. Now let's look at some tactics you can literally start using tomorrow. First up, 3 to 5 seconds. I know, 3 seconds can feel like an absolute eternity when you're standing up there in front of a class, but intentionally increasing your wait time after asking a question to just 3 to 5 seconds is incredibly transformative. Research actually shows that this brief, patient silence drastically decreases those frustrating "I don't know" responses. Plus, it significantly increases the quantity, the quality, and the variety of student answers. It just gives them the cognitive space they need to actually process complex ideas before they're forced to speak. Next up on the toolkit, hinge questions. A hinge question is a single, carefully crafted diagnostic question, and you ask it at a critical, conceptual decision point in your lesson. The lesson literally hinges on the answer. If a high percentage, let's say 80% of your students get it right, great, you move on. But here's the genius part. Every single plausible wrong answer is intentionally designed to diagnose a specific misconception. It doesn't just tell you a student is wrong, it tells you exactly why they are wrong. That allows you to reteach precisely what is misunderstood, right there in the moment. Another really powerful routine is called pose, pause, pounce, bounce. Here is how this sequence works. First, you pose an open-ended question to the room. Then you pause. There's that crucial 3 to 5 seconds of think time again. Third, you pounce on a student for an initial answer. This keeps everyone on their toes because anyone could be called on. And fourth, you bounce that student's answer over to another peer, asking them to build on it, maybe agree, or offer a totally different perspective. This completely shatters that old ping-pong dynamic we talked about. It forces participation and builds deep discussion, all without you, the teacher, having to evaluate every single step. Section 4, Empowering Student-Generated Questions, Flipping the Script. So up to this point, we've really been focusing on the teacher. But what happens when we flip the script and have students collaborate to generate their own questions? Well, they stop passively receiving information and start actively interrogating it. Experts note that students aren't always grabbed by the questions we write for them, right? They're intrigued by the questions that interest them. When they formulate the questions themselves, they are forced to connect their prior knowledge with new concepts, and that naturally leads to significantly deeper comprehension. This process essentially creates highly motivated, self-directed learners who really take ownership of their journey. And the research backs this up for sure. Student questioning leads to improved metacognition, which just means they learn to monitor their own understanding. It leads to way better peer-to-peer interactions because they're co-constructing knowledge together. Studies even show it increases overall test performance. Ultimately, it cultivates a sort of micro-democracy in the classroom where every single student's voice and curiosity are deeply valued. So how do we actually teach them this skill? A highly effective, structured method for this is called the question formulation technique, or QFT. It relies on 4 really strict rules. Number 1, ask as many questions as you can. 2, do not stop to judge, discuss, or answer any of them. 3, write down every question exactly as it is stated. And 4, change any statements in 2 questions. This rapid, rule-bound brainstorming equips your students to think divergently without that paralyzing fear of being wrong. It breaks down the barriers and just lets raw curiosity take over. Finally, Section 5, Creating a Culture of Inquiry, Building the Environment. So how do we pull the whole shebang together? A true culture of inquiry really comes alive in a dialogic Socratic circle setup. Notice how the teacher here acts as a facilitator and a guide, rather than just standing at the front delivering facts. The physical setup itself invites those basketball questioning strategies we discussed earlier. It creates a genuinely safe space for students to take risks and share their developing ideas out loud. At the heart of this culture is Socratic questioning. Now, this isn't just playing a game of 20 questions. It is about deeply, deeply exploring student thinking. By using Socratic questions, probing their assumptions, asking them for evidence, exploring the implications of what they're saying, we help students distinguish between what they truly know and what they just assume. It develops vital intellectual humility. Plus, it models for them how to ask probing questions themselves, giving them these powerful tools of dialogue that they're going to use for the rest of their lives. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with one final, provocative thought to chew on. What question will you reframe tomorrow to expand possibilities for your students? Remember, the right question, asked at the exact right moment, can turn confusion into absolute clarity and hesitation into profound curiosity. So start shifting your practice. Use your questions to make student thinking visible and just watch their achievements soar.